In this problem, we have one truck that is moving at some velocity. I'll call this V1. This will have a mass. I'll call this mass 1. We know that it's going to collide with a stationary truck that is a mass. I'll call this mass 2. And this has no initial velocity. V naught will be 0. And after this collision, they're going to stick together into one large truck. It'll be mass of 1 plus the mass of 2. And they'll be moving at some new velocity. Now, we ultimately need to find what mass 2 is. And the only piece of information they tell us is the mass of mass 1, which is 36 tons, and that 75% of the kinetic energy remains after the collision. So our energy final, I'll call this K final, will only be 75% or 0.75 of the initial kinetic energy. It'll be K initial. So K initial is going to be equal to 1 half the mass of the first truck, V1 squared, and it would be plus the mass of the second truck times its velocity, but since this has no initial velocity, that'll be 0. The final kinetic energy will be the kinetic energy of both of the trucks moving together, which will be 1 half times the mass of the trucks put together, m1 plus m2, times v2 squared. I'm going to then use this formula here. I'll get 1 half m1 plus m2 v2 squared is equal to 0.75 times 1 half m1 v1 squared. Now I have to use conservation of momentum to finish this problem. There will be momentum before the collision. It'll just be the mass of the first object times its velocity. This will be equal to the mass of the objects put together, which will be m1 plus m2, times their new velocity, which will be v2. I'm going to solve for v2. v2 will be equal to m1 v1 over m1 plus m2. Now I'm going to plug v2 into here. I'll get 1 half m1 plus m2 times m1 v1 over m1 plus m2 squared is equal to 0.75 times 1 half m1 v1 squared. Now I'm going to make myself some room. I'm going to square both of these terms in the numerator as well as these two terms in the bottom together. I'll get 1 half times m1 plus m2 times m1 squared times v1 squared all over m1 plus m2 quantity squared. This will be equal to 1 half times 0.75 times m1 v1 squared. These 1 halves are going to cancel. One of these terms is going to cancel with that. We'll be left with one term on the bottom. These v1 terms are going to cancel entirely. Now I'll write this as m1 squared over m1 plus m2. This will be equal to 0.75 m1. This m1 will cancel with that one. We'll be left with a single m1 on this side. We'll get m1 over m1 plus m2 is equal to 0.75. This will be equal to m1 is equal to 0.75 times m1 plus m2. m1 will be equal to 0.75 m1 plus 0.75 m2. I'll subtract this 0.75 m1 to both sides. We'll get that 0.25 m1 is equal to 0.75 m2. Divide the 0.75, we'll get that m2 is going to be equal to m1 over 3. Now we know that m1 is 36 tons. So M2 will be 36 over 3. M2 will be 12 tons. So that is your final answer. Thank you for watching.